It's around 11 p.m. on a Saturday night, and I'm sitting at home just getting ready to go to bed. I'm an on-call tow truck operator, and I figure I'll be going out early the next morning. Right as my head hit the pillow, my Nextel-style two-way radio chirped and a dispatcher said, "Hey, are you still awake?" "Yeah, I'm up." "Good. We've got a one-car accident in the next town over. PD wants it expedited, so please hurry, but be safe." At 10:04, I'm out the door. After a roughly 20-minute drive, I'm headed out of this small town looking for the accident, and I saw the coroner and forensics vans parked in the road amongst a dozen squad cars. A typical one-car accident has one officer sitting with it for paperwork reasons with the tow operator. Obviously, I knew things just got a lot darker than I had originally been told. Sparing the gory details, what had happened was 6 kids between 17 and 20 had been in an SUV while driving drunk, and only the driver had a seatbelt on. The vehicle swerved off the road and the driver went to correct, however. 1, he overcorrected, and 2, the road on that side had about an 8-inch lip, which made it extremely rough of a transition to pull a vehicle back on the road. As it came back on the road, the driver fishtailed, trying to correct back in the other direction and again overcorrecting. This sent the vehicle rolling down the road in and out of the 4-foot drainage ditch next to the road. I set up my Peterbilt rollback at a 70-degree angle across this 2-lane road and started to work with forensics, the coroner, to remove the vehicle from the ditch as well as preserve as much evidence as possible. No sooner than I get this winch tight on my truck do I hear the frantic beeping of a car horn. I turn around, and directly behind me is a woman who looks to be in her early 40s, who is now just holding the horn down, letting it blare nonstop as she's yelling out of her window. I ignored her and turned around to go back to this delicate job I'm in the middle of, while wondering how Karen had gotten past the police roadblock that was roughly a third of a mile up the road at the nearest intersection to keep traffic out of the area. As I'm slowly maneuvering this 8,000-pound vehicle from the roof onto its side, the honking stops. Maybe 8 seconds later, I feel a hand grab my shoulder and attempt to spin me around. I'm 6'3", 280 pounds, so there is absolutely no way this 40-something, 5'4"-ish, 160 pounds woman is achieving this goal. I let out a sigh as I stopped winching on the vehicle and looked at the sky, praying for the strength to not headbutt her. I turn around and attempt to say, "Ma'am, the road is closed due to a fatal accident." She cuts me off. "I don't care what you have to say. Just get out of my way. I'm late." Me, extremely annoyed now and talking over Karen's continued complaints, say, "Listen, witch, 5 people are dying here and there is absolutely no way anyone is driving down this road for hours. I suggest turning around and driving back through the police roadblock you somehow got around now." Karen then opens with that line that we've all heard 1,000 times. "Excuse me. I live right there," points back behind her vehicle, "and I have to use this road to get to where I am going. You will move your truck now or I'm calling the police." By this time, the forensics crew had heard all the yelling over the loudness of my truck, idles up, and the PTO engaged and walked over. Forensics crews do not dress like police, especially in the middle of the night on the weekends. They're dressed in plain clothes but carrying a badge on them, and they'll put on a hazmat-style suit if needed. None were needed on this scene, just gloves and such. Karen then asks, "Which one of you is the manager? This man won't move his truck and let me through. I'm calling the police." She was actually holding the phone to the side of her head and talking to what we would later find out was 911. Forensic officer tells her, "Ma'am, I am the police, and I don't know. I don't want to hear any more excuses. Move the truck now." She said this while clapping between each word. "I couldn't take it anymore, you dumb witch. Do your 2 remaining brain cells constantly compete for 3rd place?" The forensics officer then stifled a chuckle and said, "Ma'am, if you don't get in your car and leave this crime scene now, you will be arrested." Just as the forensics officer finished saying this, a squad car came screaming down the road from the same direction Karen came from and stopped behind her vehicle. The officer hopped out of his car, and the very first words he said were Karen's Miranda rights. Karen screamed, kicked, swore that everyone else should be arrested, and even tried to spit on me, which caused her to catch a tampering with evidence charge as we're on an active crime scene. By the time it was all done, her other charges were obstruction, assault on an officer, misuse of 911, and interfering with an investigation. She took a deal that netted her 18 weekends in the county jail. I towed her car as well. Monday morning, I met her husband, and he couldn't have been more embarrassed as he apologized over and over as he paid me and then inspected the vehicle and signed off we didn't damage it. The impound cost roughly $600 as it was police-initiated after hours and storage. Charges were $150 impound, $50 after hours, $52 a day storage, and $5 a mile each direction. From our office was roughly 17 miles from there. It all began in the quaint coffee shop where I would often spend my afternoons, sipping on my favorite caramel latte. I had just settled into my usual spot, engrossed in a captivating novel, when the door chimed, announcing the arrival of a woman and her daughter. Little did I know that these two would become the stars of my entitled parents. Worthy tale. The entitled mother, whom I'll call Karen, fitting, isn't it, was a woman in her late 30s with a distinct aura of entitlement surrounding her. Her daughter, Sarah, was a timid 9-year-old girl, constantly overshadowed by her mother's demanding presence. As Karen and Sarah approached the counter, I couldn't help but overhear their conversation. It seemed Karen was dissatisfied with the prices, demanding a discount that didn't exist. The poor barista, who I'll call Alex, tried their best to explain, but Karen's entitlement knew no bounds. "You must be mistaken," Karen barked, her voice dripping with condescension. "I know the owner, and he would never charge such exorbitant prices. Fix it immediately." I rolled my eyes, thinking to myself, yes, the famous Know the Owner card, always a classic movie. But what happened next truly caught me off guard. Karen turned her attention towards me, her eyes gleaming with entitlement. "Excuse me," she sneered. "You, give me your seat. It's much more comfortable than those lousy wooden chairs. I'm sure the owner would want his important customers to be comfortable." I raised an eyebrow, incredulous at her audacity. "Sorry, but I'm not in the habit of giving up my seat to entitled strangers," I retorted, my sarcasm evident in my tone. Karen's face flushed with anger. "How dare you speak to me like that? I demand you get up this instant." Now, let me share a little backstory about myself. Growing up in a family that valued independence and standing up for oneself, I had learned to hold my ground firmly. This encounter with Karen was no exception. I refused to be intimidated by her entitled antics. As Karen's temper flared, she lunged towards me, her hand outstretched, aiming to grab my arm. However, she hadn't anticipated my quick reflexes. I swiftly moved aside, causing her to stumble and fall flat on her face, much to the amusement of the other customers. "Oops, looks like someone's balance doesn't match their entitlement," I couldn't resist quipping, earning a few chuckles from the onlookers. Humiliated and defeated, Karen quickly scooped up her daughter and made a hasty exit, her pride wounded but not entirely extinguished. I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction, knowing that I had stood my ground against an entitled parent and emerged victorious. From that day forward, Karen never returned to the coffee shop, and the incident became a legendary tale among the regular patrons. As for me, well, I continued to enjoy my caramel lattes in peace, occasionally encountering entitled individuals, but always ready to defend myself and others against their outrageous demands. So, dear readers of Our Entitled Parents, remember this tale as a reminder that entitlement can rear its ugly head anywhere, even in the most ordinary of places. And should you find yourself face to face with an entitled parent, don't be afraid to stand your ground, armed with sarcasm and a healthy dose of self-confidence. Trying to keep the jargon to a minimum and explain acronyms, so sorry if it comes across as patronizing. The company in question are early on in their IT security maturity. They're taking steps and making progress, but it's still early days. To help speed this along, they got someone who claims to be a security expert and known from here on as Boss. Boss has an entry-level security qualification, but talks about it if it's a doctorate awarded by Hogwarts School for Hacking and Wizardry or something. Boss has suggested that I get a bit more experience and then maybe go for it. It's an arduous course. My lowest level qualification is generally accepted in the community to be attempted roughly after about 5 years' experience beyond this aforementioned arduous qualification. I'm a red team guy, which means my job is to simulate attacks in order to test the company's security. It's where I have experience and qualifications and what I know. Blue team, the defenders, is not my strong suit, but I have a relatively good knowledge of their role for someone who doesn't do it because I need to know how not to alert them when I'm doing my job. For this scenario, though, I was tasked with helping set up the Security Operations Center, SOC, and provide alerting. We get the systems set up and ready, and it comes time to set up alerts. In a meeting with Boss, I asked for a honeypot account to be created so that we could monitor it for Kerberoasting, a kind of attack which abuses a legitimate service to move laterally around the network. Conversation roughly as follows. Boss, you don't need that. Just monitor for Kerberoasting. Me, that's how we would do it. Create an account with an unused SPN and monitor for a Kerberos ticket being requested for that. Boss, don't need it. Monitor all accounts. Me, but there would be. Boss, cutting me off. All accounts. We need to monitor everything. Me, you're the boss. Part of the original request was to set up alerting to email a huge group of people when an alert was created. I decided to ignore that part of the request for testing and just email the boss. I set up an email alert for every Kerberos event and turned it on for 2 minutes. Shortly after I had this interaction, Boss, I've just had a load of email alerts come in. Me, about 1,500? Boss, I guess. My inbox is flooded. Me, well, it's alerting, with a shrugging emoji. The alerts are now only generated for Kerberos events on a honeypot account. I guess this wasn't covered in his course. So a bit of backstory here. This customer has been known for months to drive through the employee-only area. Mind you, I work at a lumber yard. This is very important. Multiple people have told them to stop, and they never did. SC, stupid customer. F, my foreman. B, my boss. Me, well me. All right, now with the story. So after I have told this entitled customer, Kevin, to not drive back here for weeks, I have tried to block off his access to the back by using full units. Didn't work. So I am near the end of my rack pulling 20 feet boards and my lift is well into the lane. I see him coming and motion to him to stop, and he does for now. My foreman approaches Kevin's truck and tells him that both access ways are fully blocked and he needs to go back to the front of the property and go out that way. Kevin said he would wait for me to move. My boss then comes out of the office to bring out some paperwork to the foreman, and as he gets near him, Kevin figures the boss was called to make him leave. I am still on the second floor of the rack putting more lumber on my rig and hear the truck start back up. Thinking he's gonna back out and leave, I say score. He's gone in my mind, but he obviously had other plans. He slams his truck into drive and makes the hard turn towards my rig. I have a board halfway onto the rig and half still in the rack. The top of his truck then hit the boards on the rig and kept driving, pulling my rig to the right and onto its side. The board that was still in my hands ended up smacking into my forehead and I fell onto the catwalk. When I finally can see straight, I go down the steps to where he is now stuck and ask him if he was gonna drive down my area again and that he was welcomed to try again after he gets out of jail. The police get called and Kevin is taken to jail and I'm looked at by an EMT. I was fine but had a bruise on my forehead, minor concussion. Kevin thankfully ends up being arrested. Finally, I'm done with this idiot.